at Bootcamp. This is just a brief little outline. It's basically everything that I just said. So forewarning, I didn't make this slide and then have a quote of myself in here. My amazing wife, Madison, who literally takes care of everything, made this quote because I say it so often. But I do want to say it again because I think it's the best answer to the question of what is the primary application. And I tell everybody that I've mentored that the application is like a book about a student who wants to become a doctor. And the goal, you guys, is as the author, is to make the admission committee or the reader fall in love with the protagonist. Like if you think about your primary application as this book and you want the reader to just fall in love with the protagonist and think that the main character of this story is going to be a phenomenal future doctor, then you're going to be able to kind of write your primary application in a way that's appealing to an admission committee member. So before we get into like the high yield stuff and the stuff that you really care about, you know, how to write a personal statement and how to write about your experience and stuff, I just want to give an example application. Some people who I've mentored before, I know Trey's probably seen this like 3 times, so don't say nothing, Trey. But this is just a sample application that may resonate with some of you guys, and I like to use it as an example. So we can start with stats. That's usually where people care the most about. So this applicant had a 3.4 cumulative GPA and a 3.2 science GPA. They had a few C's on the transcript. Nothing spectacular, not terrible, not, jumping off the page. Their MCAT, they ended up taking it twice. They got a 506 on the first time and a 511 on the second time. So again, they did fine, not jumping off the page, ended up taking the MCAT twice. Their extracurriculars were mainly 2 things. They were a college athlete and they did some research as a research assistant. And I'm not going to like pressure you guys to actually put this in the chat or put your actual guesses in, but I would like you guys to think about, based off of what you can just kind of see from this 30,000 foot view on this applicant, would you think that he got rejected? A few interviews, 1 acceptance, a few more interviews, a few more acceptances, or a lot of interviews and quite a few acceptances? Because I think that this is a pretty just kind of standard application. So again, I'm not going to pressure you guys to actually tell me what you think, but this application was actually my application, and it resulted in 11 interviews. I went on 7 of them and I got accepted to all 7. And I only say this part to say that this outcome can come, even if you have relatively standard kind of stats and extracurriculars and things like that, because it's not necessarily about having a 4.0 GPA or a 520 on the MCAT to be able to have, 10 interviews. It's more so about, are you able to convey to a reader that you are somebody that reader wants to meet? And then when you meet them, are you somebody that they need to have in their medical school? And you don't have to have a perfect stats or thousands of hours of clinical shadowing or whatever to be able to convey that message. So the purpose of this talk is really just going to be, how can I take what I currently have or what I'm currently building, depending on where you are on the stage, to kind of make it into this book that the admission committee members are going to fall in love with. There are a few kind of just check boxes, and I don't like using that because we don't like to see applicants do that, but there are a few things that you just have to have that, are part of it. So I want to talk about it. And again, each of these you'll be able to talk more in your breakout sessions. But the first is just letters of rec. This is a really important part of the application, especially as applications become more holistic. When admission committee members see that somebody can speak very, very highly on you, it makes it more likely that you are a real human being, because you can have a perfect stats, but if you don't have another human being actually advocate for you, it is more concerning than anything. So when you're thinking about getting your letters of recommendation, choose people who know you well. Don't go up to somebody just because they have a big name and you want a letter of rec from a big name or something like that. Make sure the person actually knows you. Choose people who can speak to different aspects of your life. This is huge because if you get 4 science teachers, they can speak to your academic prowess, but they can't speak to your character, outside of the classroom. They can't speak to, your ability to lead like somebody in a, one of your extracurriculars could, because you were the leader of whatever you were doing. And they can't speak to certain characteristics that make you seem more like a well-rounded applicant. And so make sure when you're thinking about your letter writers, it's important, like in this 4th bullet point, you are going to need a few science professors. So make sure you have those. But outside of that, try to, like this last one says, spice it up with a coach or a boss or a community service leader. Um, and choose people who are going to, highlight the important parts of your story. So when you're thinking about building this story, if you're saying that my story is this, this applicant who got interested in medicine from, I'll tell you my story because I can tell that one the best, from getting hurt doing track and then got interested, did some research, got even more interested. Just like me, just giving that brief story like that, you would expect that I would have a letter of rec from a track coach, right? I'd have a letter of rec from a research advisor, because those are all funneling into this central story that I'm trying to build. So when you're thinking about your letter writers, don't just think about, who has a big name or whatever. Think about people who know you and people who can play a role in facilitating the telling of your story. Another aspect of this is just making sure that you understand, I think for me, it was the most efficient and effective way of building a school list. I know that this can be a pretty stressful process. And the way that I set it up for myself is I think about it in 3 different kind of categories: target schools, reach schools, safety schools. And the way that I went about identifying what schools fit into each of these buckets was using the MSAR. And so the MSAR is just kind of a resource that tells you about the schools, but it also tells you kind of the mean stats for the accepted applicants at that school. And unfortunately, the way that people are still using or identifying reach schools, safety schools, target schools is by stats. That may change in the future. I don't really know a more kind of like straightforward way of approaching this, but I think that it is a way to kind of just make sure you have a good understanding of how you can build your school list. So for target schools, I really recommend, looking at the mean MCAT particularly. GPA is not as an objective measure. So if you're going to choose one, choose the MCAT, and think about where your MCAT sits to the school's mean, or the median. Actually, I think they may even use in the MSAR. But if you're within like 1 standard deviation, so if the school's median or mean MCAT is like 510 and you have a 508 or a 512 or something within that range, that's probably going to be a good target school. You kind of fit what their typical student looks like from a statistics standpoint. Whereas a safety school is where your stats are more than 1 standard deviation higher than that school that you're looking at. So if the school has a mean or median of a 505 MCAT and you have a 515, you would be seen to that school as an applicant who on paper, statistically, scores higher than their average student. And the reach is the opposite, right? It's where you have the 505 and you're applying to the 515. And you'll see here that, 50% I think is reasonable for you to kind of be within that target school range. But what you see here is it's not a 25 to 25 between safety and reach. I am very adamant that I think if you apply in the right way, you have a higher chance of getting reach schools than you even do safety schools, which is a win, I think, for you as well. And so I think about 30% of the schools that you apply to should be reach schools, especially going through this program, having the mentorship, having the guidance, using the resources that we have to really craft that story and your narrative. I think you do have a higher chance of getting a reach school than you would otherwise. And actually, when I applied, I probably was more so like 50% reach schools and like 40% target and maybe like 10% safety. So I pushed the bill even more. And of course, depending on who you are and your level of like confidence or your level of risk aversion and things like that, this could look different for you. But when you're thinking about how to go about building it, this is a pretty, I think, standard framework. I think we're gonna get into kind of the things that are really important and I think are good topics of discussion, especially when you're going through your breakout rooms. The first is, this is another aspect of your primary application, and this is your experiences section. And like it's bolded here, you can see it's time to start your humble bragging. I've seen so many students really not take full advantage of the experience section. And I think they just approach it as a list of things that they've done. But this isn't your resume or like your CV, right? We've talked about those kind of things in a Slack recently. where you're just listing things that you've done. That's not the purpose of your experience section. The purpose of this is to actually play a significant role in telling of that story, right? Because if you're thinking of a novel, even though I'm going to change it because we don't read no more, we just watch TV. So if you're like thinking of like your favorite TV show, and you've been following a TV show and you're thinking of the main character of that TV show that you absolutely love, that you just want to see win, part of the relationship that you're building with that character is based off of the experiences that they've had, and you being able to see how those experiences have made them into this character that you really resonate with. And so when you're thinking about getting 10 to 15 experiences that you have, I'm pretty sure the limit is still 15. Think about how they're playing into an overall central theme of who a person is. And this is why it's so important that you don't get into that habit of the checkboxing kind of approach to your application, into your pre-med experience. Because if you're just doing random things just because you feel like they look good, or somebody told you that pre-meds need to be doing this, your story is going to be so convoluted that the reader is going to have no idea who you actually are, and it's going to be very hard for them to fall in love with you as a character, right? And so you have to think about, it takes self-reflection to say, okay, what do I personally value, and what are the experiences that I want to spend my time in? That's going to be good, one, because you're actually going to enjoy the time spent doing those things. You don't want to just force yourself to do things. You're going to hate yourself and you're going to hate your pre-med experience. And two, when you're actually writing about your experiences, it's way easier to put it all together into a central picture. So of course, there's going to be some kind of like random things that you have on there, that one volunteer experience that you did just kind of like randomly, or that one research project that was kind of random or whatever. You're going to have those kind of things, but for the most part, you want these experiences to kind of come together to paint a picture of who you are. And then while you're doing that, you should be able to write about the experiences in a way that shows growth over time, and that you have characteristics that are going to make for a really good doctor. So going back to that analogy of like a TV show and a main character, as they're going through their life and they're going through different scenes of their personal journey and things like that, you're able to kind of watch this character go through experiences, maybe have shortcomings, but then ultimately overcome them, and then develop certain strengths after that allow them to overcome things moving forward, or that change their perspective and allow them to kind of conquer different challenges that come. And you're just able to kind of watch them be molded by the experiences that they have. As I'm reading through somebody's experience section, I should get the same kind of picture and within each experience. And so, oftentimes somebody will just say, in this experience, I did, X, Y, Z, or I'll give a more direct example. In my research experience, I worked with so-and-so on a project titled Biomechanics of Iliac Flare, and we published this in the Journal of Science. So that is fine. That tells me what you did, but I don't actually know anything about you based on that experience. I know what the experience was, but I have no idea about you. Versus somebody who says, in this, I was fortunate enough to join a project titled Biomechanics of Iliac Flare, where I assisted with collecting data and running the statistics on whatever we were doing. Through this process, I learned, how data drives a lot of the research that we do, and we were able to use this to support our thesis, or our thought that XYZ happens with iliac flares. I don't know, whatever. That was that was actually one of my college thesis projects that I clearly remember a lot about. But you guys get the point where I'm able to demonstrate things that I learned from this experience. I'm able to demonstrate how I grew as a researcher, how I now have a better appreciation of how science drives a lot of the evidence-based things that happen in medicine. And so when you're writing your experiences, you need to do so in a way that you're accomplishing all those things. How did you grow? What did you learn from it? Those kind of things. And then the last point here is just what characteristics are you able to demonstrate that is telling me in this experience that you're going to be a phenomenal doctor. And so when you're writing about things, write about it in a way where you don't have to say, I'm inquisitive, right? To be able to show somebody like, oh, I, took it upon myself to look further into this question that we had. And I realized that we were performing something maybe not ideal. and we went back to the drawing board, changed it, and the outcome changed in our favor, whatever it is. So you can describe things in a way where I'm understanding who you are without you just saying like, this is who I am. And again, think about your main character in the TV show. They're not saying this character is this. You're learning who that character is by the way that they're being portrayed. So portray yourself in a way that I'm able to learn who you are and the characteristics that you have, and highlight the characteristics that you have that are going to make you a good doctor. And the last piece of kind of the primary application that I want to talk about, and this is kind of like, I think the climax of your story, right, is your personal statement. And this is when you want to continue to humble brag. So these aren't the parts of your, story where you're talking about, the things that you struggle with, or, bringing up the weaknesses in your application. This is like not the place for that. Okay, your experiences are not the place for that. Your personal statement are not the place for that. Humble bragging is bolded for a reason. You don't want to, if I'm reading through somebody's personal statement, which I have done, just as recent as like this past admission cycle, and I'm reading through people's personal statements, and they're talking about the things that they feel bad about with themselves or in their application and stuff, and that anxiety that they feel based off of one little thing in their application. They're just trying to find a way to kind of explain themselves. Personal statement is not the place for that. This is where the climax of the story, right? You want to see the main character win right now. This is like where you're just like, oh, they've been through all these experiences and they've grown in all these ways, and they're developing into this amazing person. Now I want to see them win. I want to see them, slay the dragon or whatever happens in stories. And so when you're doing this, you want to accomplish basically two main things. One is you want to emphasize that you are going to be a phenomenal doctor. You have the characteristics that are going to make for a phenomenal doctor, similar to what we just talked about with the experiences. And then two, that you're doing this for the right reasons, that you're not just like doing this because your parents made you or because you want a lot of money or whatever. You can get a lot of money in ways other than being a doctor, way more than doctors make. So you want to make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons, that you genuinely want to do this. And so you can see here, why do you want to be a doctor? What experiences have built on that initial spark? And what characters do you have that will make for a great doctor? And I think that the general approach, and I literally just wrote my own other personal statement now applying for residency, which is crazy. But I think that there's a general approach to writing one of these that it's kind of like a tried and true method. And I definitely advise for it. You can definitely get more creative, especially in medical school. Personal statements, you can get more creative with those than probably residency ones. But so some people take more of like a theatrical approach to it, which is fine as long as it's not over the top. But I think a general framework of approaching this is kind of this chronologic framework that starts with how you got interested in medicine and wanting to become a doctor, walking them through the experiences that kind of continue to like spark the flame and reignite the flame, and the experiences that built that motivation for you, walking them through that story until where you are now. And then all the while being able to demonstrate throughout that story of start to where you are now that you have what it takes to become a good doctor. And so I've been kind of like vaguely talking about have what it takes. But really what that is just, or like characteristics of a good doctor and things like that. It's just like if you thought of your favorite doctor experience, and most people will include examples of experiences that they've had with their own physicians or physicians that they shadowed or whatever. It's what you see in those people. They're hardworking, they're very empathetic, they genuinely care about what they're doing. They, have this kind of like inquisitiveness about science and pushing the field forward and wanting to continue learning and all of those kind of things. They have just those kind of characteristics, and all of you guys have those characteristics. That's why you're in this path, because otherwise you shouldn't be, because this is not a path that you just want to do for fun, because it's not always fun. But you have the characteristics and you have the motivation to be a doctor, and all of you guys will be doctors, I have no doubt. So this is now your time to kind of put all of that together into a central, like, summary story of who you are, where you came from the start of your interest into medicine to where you are now. And then like why, as the reader, I am so confident that this person is going to be a phenomenal physician. And so doing this can be hard. It takes hundreds of drafts, like honestly, at least dozens of drafts, maybe not hundreds, but it takes tons of drafts. And you have to have tons of people look at it. The more people that look at it, the more that you're able to get a sense of what your story looks like to somebody's eyes that's not your own, to see if it flows well, all those things. So the earlier you start with this process, the better. But again, you'll be able to jump into some of these breakout rooms to talk more about that. The last thing that I'll say about the application is I can't emphasize this enough, like literally apply yesterday. It's not even open yet, but like apply. Like as soon as you can, you should be sitting in your application. And I know that timing can be challenging for a lot of people. You guys are in a great position right now, right? Because you're, what is it? It's February. Application doesn't open up, I don't think, until like May or something. So you guys are in a position right now of setting yourself up for success. But I have seen a lot of times when, people will take the MCAT in like July or something, and they push their the time that they submit their applications until August or whatever. And I think you can fall victim to the idea that admission committee people aren't like human beings and not really understanding how the process is. And I touched on this when I was in the little Instagram live thing that we did. But on the admission committee, I can tell you guys that if we set aside that we are going to interview a certain amount of people, let's just, for the sake, this isn't how Mayo does it, but for the sake of just easiness with numbers, let's just say we have set aside that we will interview 100 people. And of those 100 people, we will accept 50. And if we start interviewing people in August, as we're getting applications, and if I know that, okay, I'm one of 10 people on this admission committee, I get to choose 10 interviews that I want, and because each of us get to choose 10. As people are coming through that I'd like, I'm like, oh, I have 10. I have a ton of these that I want to give this person one, this person one. Oh, I like this person one. And then as I see them and I have 5 acceptances that I get to give, I'm like, oh, I like you. Here's one. But then by the time it's, August or September or something like that, November, October, November-ish, and I have like 2 interviews left that I can give to somebody, I'm going to be reading these applications through a very different light. They're not going to get the same kind of like, everybody gets an interview kind of thing. I only have a few left. I'm not going to be as lenient to give these out. And the same goes for the acceptances after the interview. And so when you apply late in the application cycle, you do yourself a disservice, because most people will be applying later than the first day that it opens. But then, so you're in a bigger pile. If I have a pile in August that's like this big versus a pile in November, October that's like that big to go through, you just have more people that you're just inherently competing against. But then just from like admission committee members are human beings, and we have less interview offers that we can give out at a certain time, it only makes sense that I'm not going to want to give out as many or I'm not going to want to give them out as easily, I should say. So where you are right now is a fantastic place to start doing some of these things, like working on a draft of your personal statement and your experiences, starting to build that school list, getting your letters of rec requested and your transcripts requested, doing all of these things ahead of time. And I know the MCAT is another kind of, a whole nother topic, but trying to have all of these things set in stone so that when day one of that application cycle opens, you can click submit. And that's one of the things that I did. I literally had a reminder on my phone, because you can upload your entire primary application like the first week of May, and then you can click submit on the last week. So I uploaded everything and I was just chilling on it. And then I had a reminder on my phone right when it opened to click submit. And I clicked submit like literally right as it opened. And I think that played a significant role in my success going through. Of course, nothing is going to play as significant as a role of writing a good book, right? Putting together a strong application. But this is something that I think people underestimate. So moving forward, I just want to give a few of the resources that we have through Teach As You Learn, and then I'll hand it off. Oops, I've probably been talking too long. What am I on time? Yeah, I've been talking a little bit. So I'll just briefly go through these resources. So we have some of these things. MCAT resources are coming soon, but we already have stuff for the personal statement and the primary application, and even for interviews once the time comes. So we have bundles and things like that. And I know some people have already started getting these, which is fantastic. But we have over 20 personal statements. So you can actually see examples. You can schedule one-on-one meetings with mentors to kind of go through the stage. You can have drafts like very thoroughly reviewed with feedback and all of those kind of things. And, you know, if you look at what resources like this cost online, it's absurd. And part of the reason why we do this is to make it not as absurd. But you can get all of these resources through Teach As You Learn. And if you just wanted to do these things individually, you can do that as well. This is just an example of what it would kind of look like. Would be the personal statement package from, as you can see, we have 23, 20, like 25 here, right? There's even MD, PhD personal statements here. And then this is what it would look like. This is actually my personal statement. So my own personal statements in there if you guys wanted to look at what it looks like. And then we have other things just for the primary application as well, which is primarily going through your primary applications. Again, you can meet to discuss things, and then you can have your entire primary application reviewed. So this is just another example of what it looks like. And it's nice because every single example of primary application is from somebody who successfully matriculated to medical school. And you can see what their grades were like. You can see what their experiences were like. Again, this is definitely mine. Madison put together this presentation, so I can see that she just put all of my business out here. But that's good because I want you guys to be able to see what it looks like. So I will now move it. Let's see. Oops. How can I get up out of here? I think I'm still sharing my screen, but I think I can stop here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'll let either Juliana or anyone else in the curriculum team take over to get everybody squared away into their small groups.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, JR. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Juliana.
Thank you, JR. That was an awesome overview of kind of the primary app as a whole and some great insights on kind of each section. And as you can see, we have a lot of resources to help you guys out and hopefully give you some personalized feedback. And like JR said, it's so important to get a lot of eyes on your personal statement, your activities, and all these essays that you have to write moving forward. So we're here to help and excited to get to work with all of you. Now we're going to jump into breakout rooms based on different parts of that